Welcome into the Gig'em 24/7 Sports Podcast. I am Andrew Hattersley, joined by Brian Perroni. Brian, how are we doing today? How's everything going?
I mean, it could be better. I'm doing okay,
Yeah,
but we're about to talk some Texas A&M football, so
yeah.
things could be better. But we're also going to talk a 5-star commit, so I guess there's some silver lining there.
I figured we'd at least start off on a good note before we kind of get into diving into this game. And obviously, we sit here again, just like we did last year. At this point, A&M loses
Yeah,
42-24 to Mississippi State, sits at 3-2 going into Alabama week. Going to be a bit more difficult of a task this year, though, heading to Bryant-Denny Stadium. Last year, obviously, was at Kyle Field and one of the best environments I've ever seen. And,
that
this
was
year, obviously, going to have
loud,
it was loud. And you had the
loud.
home field environment, obviously, a huge recruiting weekend. This one, the trip up to Tuscaloosa, I guess just looking big picture, obviously, coming out of that Mississippi State game, a lot of questions on all sorts of fronts. Where do you think A&M goes from here? I guess that's just kind of the simple question with Alabama coming up.
Okay, I mean, last year I expected A&M to be 3-3 after this
Yeah.
game, but they pulled out that win. And Zach goes out. I mean, the offense is struggling this year. It struggled more under Calzada. I mean, everybody was frustrated. There was no downfield passing him at all. So A&M, it's it's weird to say this, but they're actually in a better place on offense than they were last year. They're not in a good place. They're still. I mean,
Yeah.
I think somebody said, they were talking about A&M and said, "Oh, we're just Iowa, but with Devon Achane."
Achane. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, yeah. I mean, that actually may. I mean, it's tough to see that, but it's probably true. But still, A&M is better than last year. Again, not good, but better than last year
Yeah.
on offense. So, if they were able to do it last year, Calzada became Superman. I mean, that was.
Yeah.
Did you pay attention like this summer or spring, whatever it was, they announced he was transferring for Auburn? Auburn fans didn't really watch like A&M
Yeah.
last year. I mean, why
They
would they?
didn't.
They saw A&M upset Alabama, and so they thought they were. I mean, they expected just this like savior to come in. And I talking to a few fans like during camp, and they're like, "Oh, he's got to win the job." Like,
Yeah.
and I tried to. I was like, I really doubt it. And I'm not trying to slander Calzada. Like, I mean, he did as best he
Yeah.
could. It was just, it was just a struggle. And then, he ended up third string coming out of camp with them. But yeah, so all that to say is if A&M's offense last year could all of a sudden get something going for Alabama, then there's at least hope. Now, the line when it opened, so a lot of the books put it on this summer, like right after the whole Jumbo Saban, like,
Mm-hmm.
or spring, summer, when right after their whole back and forth, when A&M called that press conference like 12 hours after Saban made his comments there, that, something about A&M, everybody on the team was bought. I don't think Saban meant it incredibly maliciously, but I also think Nick Saban knows what he's doing every time
He does.
he says something. So the lines opened then, and it was Alabama by 14 or so. They were coming in season number 1. They had the reigning Heisman Trophy winner. But now that we're here for game week, it opened, I think, this week at like 23 and a half, 22 and a half, 23 and a half. And
23
that's
and a half.
with Bryce Young, the reigning Heisman winner, possibly not playing. I mean,
Yeah.
A&M fans, if you would have told them this summer that, hey, there's a chance, Bryce Young may not play, they'd be,
Right for the
okay,
picking.
this game, okay. They would, and then you're like, oh yeah, also you're a 23 and a half point underdog. It's just, the team is just, it's frustrating because, they'll do things right and you'll think, okay, it's there. And then just like all the turnovers in the game. I mean, it's just, it's a bit maddening to cover because I just can't figure out the identity of this team.
I come out of a lot of weeks and this one particularly and it's one of those traps you kind of have to guard against, especially with this team. To your point about just how it feels like they're in position to strike it at certain points. They have a chance in this game against Mississippi State to go up 7-0, and Devon Onchain fumbles down by the goal line. Rare occurrence, but takes points off the board. They have a chance to come back and get a field goal right before the half. A strip sack fumble and the first turnover that Max Johnson's had since taking over takes points off the board. They have a chance coming out of halftime, put a nice drive together. Deuce Harmon with the forces a fumble, and A&M has a chance to come back down and get it back within a score. And a block kick goes back the other way, and suddenly you're looking at 21-3. And the way A&M's had struggles offensively, the game's basically over at that point. I know they kind of traded scores at that point, but realistically, at 21-3, the game was pretty much over. To your point, I mean, it's like a mistake here, a mistake there. But it's a different guy every single time that's kind of making the mistake, and A&M just can't get out of their own way. They were running the ball really effectively against Mississippi State, and for a quarter and a bit, basically did what they needed to do to really be on the road and in that game, and you felt good about where they were going. And I look ahead to this week against Alabama. You obviously can't have those turnovers. You're going to have to go have a couple go your other way. The Antonio Johnson pick six is definitely one. There were a couple other missed opportunities in the first half where you kind of think about, well, what if A&M's able to make that interception or make that play? All those need to happen against Alabama. Everything needs to go right, just like it kind of did last year.
Yeah, you can't make mistakes against them. They
No.
could have gotten away with a few of them versus Mississippi State, but you're right. You don't make mistakes against a Nick Saban team and expect to pull an upset.
No question. They have to be fundamentally sound, and but they have talent on offense, and I think that's what frustrates A&M fans. Is you look at guys like Evan Stewart and Moose Muhammad are making plays, and up front, it's perplexing to see them struggle at times. They ran the ball really, really well, but with a guy like Reuben Foddery and Bryce Foster and Trey Zune, I think progressing as the year goes along, you figured this offensive line would be playing better than
Layden Robinson was a preseason All-American.
Layden Robinson
it's just the line. Yeah, that's another maddening thing. What happened? They forgot how to block.
Yeah, it's just they've struggled with twists, they've struggled with stunts all season. Whether it was Sam Houston gave them problems in the first game, obviously Appalachian State, and you just look at the numbers. I was looking at the offense before this, and obviously there's a lot of questions about will Jimbo Fisher give out the play calling, and I think those are all going to be answered after the season, because at this point you kind of are what you are for the next 2 months. You're not going to make drastic changes during the season aside from changing a quarterback here or there.
Scott Frost is free. Scott Frost is free.
Scott Frost is free.
You can hire him right now. I'm kidding. Bring him in. They're not going to do that, but he's free.
Yeah, bring him in during the bye week, and Paul Christ is free too now. Actually,
yeah,
you could bring him in too.
Hey, he could be an analyst, but Frost was a good OC at Oregon, man. They had a good offense under him. So
bring him in, install the offense in 2 weeks, and we'll see something different against South Carolina. You look at.
You heard it here first.
You heard it here, right? Just like you did about bringing the number 2 player in the nation back-to-back years.
We got him. Yeah, if we can will that to happen, man, we can will Scott Frost being the play caller by October 22nd
against South Carolina. You're gonna have to buy this weekend. Can get him in during the bye week. But no, that's there's certainly plenty being said about that, and do you use the transfer portal more? These are all questions that are going to have to be answered in the off season. I guess the big question is Max Johnson, obviously day to day. Jimbo Fisher said today during his press conference, we'll see whether he is able to go on Saturday. He looked really in a lot of discomfort on Saturday against Mississippi State, and hard to see him potentially being able to play. So you look at Haynes King, you look at potentially Connor Wigman. Where does A&M go from here? And is it the same question this week as it might be during the bye week? Do you go with a guy against Alabama and then potentially go with Connor Wigman? I have my thoughts, but wanted to get your take on that as well.
All right. If Max Johnson's healthy, you got to go with him just because, he hasn't been great, but he's been a game manager and has, at least has experience. It'd be tough to throw a guy out there for the first time, at Bryant-Denny Stadium. I think you got to go with Max Johnson. If he's not healthy, what do I think will happen? I think A&M goes with Haynes King. I mean, he won the job. Do I think? Would I? No, you don't have anything to lose. I mean, honestly, you just don't. And let's say A&M gets behind, throw Connor Wigman out there. Let's see what he can do. Maybe he just goes crazy. Maybe he struggles and throws 3 interceptions. But at least you get that out of the way now. He's like, let's say that happens, then if he's the starter, say next year, you're like, he comes out for the first game and he's had experience. It's not all of a sudden just like the crowd on top of him for the first time ever. And he doesn't know what to do, just like, freezes up because he's like, hey, I played at the number 1 team in the country. So this is this is a cakewalk. So I say go with Wigman. Do I expect it? No. Even if they're, even if they're up big or down big, I really don't. I think that Jimbo is a big fan of Haynes King. I think Haynes King is, he's the coach's kid. He looks good, a lot of times in practice because, he does well, but it just doesn't translate to the field. Yeah, he can run, and Jimbo does really values running, but so can Wigman. But I don't expect it. But that's, you got to get the fan base needs something to hold on to right now. They need, and so you throw. So, man, when I was in college, this the name, but this is before your time. But I was in college, and I don't remember who the starting quarterback was. Maybe Dustin Long. I don't remember. But A&M had a 5-star freshman on the bench, and I forget which game it was, but all of Kyle Field. And the internet wasn't big then, so it was just crazy that everybody knew who he was. All of Kyle Field just starts chanting Reggie, for Reggie McNeil. And I think is that game or the next game, he came in against Oklahoma and ended up as the Big 12 Player of the Week and upsetting Oklahoma. So, gave, the season wasn't great, but it gave fans at least hope and something to look to and a reason to watch. I mean, so if let's say they, lose to Alabama, then, you'll probably beat South Carolina and some other teams, but fans aren't going to be excited. They're not going to plan their Saturdays or their whole weekends around it. What they would do that though, if you got a 5-star true freshman as your starting QB. So I would at least watch it potentially going forward. And I think that if the season sort of falls apart, I think Jimbo's going to have pressure on him from a lot of different people. I think it happened with Max Johnson already. Like, I don't know if Jimbo would have made that change if he didn't sort of feel some pressure. So it very well could be. Everybody wants to see Wigman. It's like, all right, this guy was ranked high. You've been talking, everybody's been talking about how good his future is. Why not have the future now?
No doubt. And I think here's my thought. If you're going to have Haynes King out there, and this gets into a whole, conversation about play calling and all that, scheme for the things that he does well. I think one of the things that I've had a question about in the last couple of weeks watching him, why not get him out on the perimeter and try to force the defense to make decisions on sort of read option plays, get him and Shane out on the edge and make a defender choose between which guy to kind of go for. And do you have confidence in him to be able to execute that play? You're using his legs and what he does best. You can create some big plays off of that. And I think you've just got to kind of play to his strengths. You can't just drop him back 20 times a game and ask him to throw it and read coverages. That's just not what he does well. The drive that they put together against Mississippi State where he was able to score, they got him out with his legs on the perimeter running. And you saw like the speed and all that. I think if you're going to go with Haynes King, that's kind of what you got to do is you've got to get him on the perimeter and force teams to respect him running and try to, keep defenses at bay or on their heels doing that. I just think you have to get a bit more creative if you're going to roll him out there. As for Wigman, I agree with you. I think you see how this week goes. I think Jimbo Fisher is also obviously the ultra competitor. He's not mailing in this season, regardless of whether they win or lose this weekend. And if they're 3-3, he probably still thinks, well, we can win 6 more games and finish at 9-3 with better execution. And, I know fans get sick of hearing that, but that's just kind of the way he's wired. And then in the offseason, kind of make the big changes. For me, I would go with Wigman as well. And I think on top of giving fans something to get excited about, you at least get a glimpse to the future. And I've been talking to sources when I get out to games and things like that, and had an interesting discussion a couple weeks ago with one in particular who's very familiar with the A&M program. And we were kind of talking about the quarterback room and how everybody kind of views them. And the feedback I got on Connor Wigman was the receivers just don't have much chemistry with him. And well, you have 6 games right now with a bunch of young receivers. Or 7 games with a bunch of young receivers to get that sort of chemistry and a chance to get him out there, get him experience, get him playing in games with those receivers. That was the biggest piece of feedback I got was, well, they don't have a lot of chemistry with him. They have some chemistry with Max Johnson. They have some with Haynes King. Things are just kind of inconsistent, but with Connor Wigman, they just didn't feel like they had the chemistry. And, I think you have a perfect opportunity. You're not between 3 losses and 5 losses. It's probably still going to be disappointing on any regard, no matter how many losses.
I mean, we're getting ready to cover this team at the Texas Bowl. Just get ready for it. It's like,
just get ready for it. And
I saw somebody had the latest projections. Texas A&M against Kansas in the Texas Bowl. Like, oh, of course.
Who would have thought that coming?
The 1 year Kansas is good though. It's like A&M fans have made fun of Texas for losing to Kansas twice, and if they happen to lose to the Jayhawks, like what the?
Well, they would be the one bullet they've had. Yeah, that's the one bullet they've had this entire time, and they would really be kind of looking at that game, think, oh boy, yeah, we got it. But it would be, this team had big goals. And so, you're playing in the Texas Bowl. You've got to be able to give something to build off in the offseason. I don't think you can go into this offseason, again, facing a ton of questions and not know what you're building around. That's part of the opportunity to play. And look, A&M hasn't been afraid of playing young players to this point. A&M's been playing a ton of young players on both sides of the ball. I just don't get why you wouldn't give Connor Wigman, because again, Jimbo Fisher spoke glowingly of him in the press conference today. I don't get why you wouldn't at least give him a chance and see what he can do. And if he creates a spark, he creates a spark. But it's going to be interesting, and there's going to be a lot more questions to kind of talk about coming out of this Alabama game. If you're A&M, you have a chance, just like you did last year, to flip the script in a hurry, or you're sitting at 3-3 and going into the bye week with a lot of questions as well. So it's going to be fascinating. We'll have a lot more on Alabama as well later in the week, previewing that matchup, what A&M needs to do, and
please
all
watch.
that. So,
I promise that there are going to be talk of things that A&M can actually do. I know fans are, when I put the article out about with the line, let's jump on Alabama before it goes up from 23.5. Like, come on, don't give up. Okay, yes, A&M probably does not come out with a win, but last year. I think there's a better chance this year than last year.
I do too. I do too. And you know what? If the interesting thing that we haven't talked about is if Bryce Young doesn't play, well, that would be the first start for Jalen Milroe. That's a heck of a.
He has not been a great passer either. I mean, I know when I was talking to the board, how A&M Milroe really liked A&M and he was actually close to committing to A&M, but the Aggies decided to go with Eli Stowers in that class. Stowers ended up moving to tight end. Now is back at quarterback, but isn't really in the battle. So, people want to just blame Jimbo for all this. Well, right now, Milroe's a running back playing quarterback. He has not been a great passer. I mean, he played more than a half, and I think he had less than like 70 yards passing against a really good receiving core. So, but he had 90 yards rushing. So
I was going to say the big plays came off the ground and with his legs. And that's certainly something he can make you pay with the legs. And Jimbo Fisher did talk about that today, actually, about, Jalen Milroe versus Eli Stowers and the decision, as he said, for Stowers was the first to jump on board. But A&M really, really liked Jalen Milroe and recruited him quite heavily. And so they certainly know what they're getting with him. But I'm with you. I mean, there's pieces again, and it's tough because they just have to be more consistent. Devon Achane was rolling last week against Mississippi State, was rolling. And, if A&M's able to stick with the running game, who knows where that kind of goes. But I do think that's the formula for A&M is to pull off an upset. Devon Achane has to have 150 yards, 200-yard game, and A&M has to create some plays with their special teams as well. And if they get out to an early lead again, who knows where it kind of goes. But on that note, I did watch Nick Saban's press conference this morning, and you can tell he's got kind of an edge to him this week. He mentioned last year that he warned everybody about A&M and nobody would listen to him, and they were.
He does it. It's the man who cried
and
wolf as being a favorite. Remember, he does that every game. It's poison.
Every game. It's poison. He talked about whatever you guys want to talk about, poison. He's like, nobody listens to me, or sometimes they do. So he was certainly on one of those again about being the favorites and not taking anything for granted, and that they're going up against a really well coached football team in A&M, and he is going to hammer that point home all week, and that's just his formula and where he goes. So he did talk about the rap poison.
You were telling me that he was asked who was going to start. And
yep.
Jimbo, actually. I wonder if they watched each. Who was first with their answer?
So Saban was first, and Fisher was second.
All right, you got to share this, but I got to think that Fisher had. I mean, he had to have seen it if it's like the same wording. But all right, tell the people the answers. Somebody
asked about Milroe, and I thought it was a fine question. It was, does Alabama have a package in play for Milroe if Bryce Young doesn't play or something? It was something along those lines of just a relatively nuanced question. And Nick Saban said, yes, we have packages. We always have packages for Jalen Milroe. He said, what do you think? I'm going to call Jimbo Fisher and tell Jimbo Fisher our plays and our plan for Jalen Milroe and Bryce Young. And then Jimbo spoke at 2, and they asked him about Haynes King and whether he saw Haynes King being able to suit up on Saturday night. He said, what do you think I'm going to call Nick Saban and tell Nick Saban who's playing quarterback on Saturday night? And you're like, both wordings sounded eerily similar to each other.
Yeah, I know they were on staff for a little while together, but I promise Jimbo had to have seen that press conference, because he's probably mad that Nick Saban didn't call him up and tell him.
Yeah, starting. So he's like, all right, where was the call? Where was the phone call? I'm going to
use your line, so.
I'm gonna use it and make that exact same point. So he was asked today, and he had no interest. Neither side had any interest about revisiting everything that happened over the summer. And
that's shocking.
They were both ready to absolutely move on from that. And Jimbo said, I've addressed this. I'm done talking about this. And Nick's a great coach. So
what do you think the SEC conference call this week on Wednesday? What do you think they're both going to be asked?
100%.
When you get all the media from all the national sites, that's the story.
Everybody looking for that national angle. That's what the story is going to be about.
Yeah, this game was circled on the calendar. I mean, this was the game of the year. I mean, I remember in the summer, it's like the best games of the year. This was it. Do you know where game day is this week? Kansas. Game days in Kansas.
Kansas versus TCU, right?
Yes. During the game of the year, they're in Lawrence, Kansas, just like everybody thought. So,
my God, and this is now twice that everybody kind of thought game day might be where A&M's going to be, and twice they've gone somewhere else. Who would have had Kansas and TCU as the college game day location before the year started? So,
I mean, what about okay? So this summer, I tell you, A&M, they started out 3-2. You're like, man. So they fell to Miami and Arkansas. Those are going to be the tough teams. So no, they beat those teams.
They beat the top 25 programs. In both of those two, and then you lose to Mississippi State and Appalachian State, and it's wild. And you look at those two top 25 wins over Arkansas and Miami. That's in the rear mirror now. Folks aren't really looking at that at all, and the odds of that happening was slim to none for sure. So, but it's gonna be a fascinating week, and we'll certainly have some good stuff and to break that game down. I know it was a rough week. We did have some good news last week on the recruiting trail for A&M that we're going to get to after a quick break, and A&M did get a big win on the recruiting trail. Welcome back into the Gig'em 24/7 Sports Podcast. I am Andrew Hattersley, joined by Brian Perroni again. Brian, speaking of things we all saw coming, right? David Hicks,
Yeah, oh
five-star
yeah,
out of Katy Pato,
called
uh,
it.
called it,
Yeah.
right? We totally saw that one coming. No, it was kind of that the whole way this played down was crazy from behind the scenes, but huge victory for A&M, and a credit to the staff for not giving up on a kid that, look, for the couple weeks leading up to his decision, all the buzz seemed to be centered around Oklahoma, and it was one of those things. Well, A&M has made a good run. They got him back on campus twice, and they had those two late Zoom calls that allowed them to kind of flip the momentum. But my goodness, what do you make of what they were able to get in Hicks, and what this win kind of means on the recruiting trail?
I mean, so I wouldn't want to recruit a defensive lineman against A&M right now. I mean, we saw it
Yeah,
last year. They signed, I think, 4 of the top 5 defense
yeah,
linemen in the country. They signed 4 5-stars, 6 top 100 players on the line, and now they've got, David Hicks, another 5-star. So, I mean, it's not unprecedented, but I know there's, arguing over the time, when did Hicks really know is going to be A&M? Now, I don't think I know I got, word right, not right before, pretty well, really
it was
close
like
within an
10
hour.
minutes before. Yeah,
Yeah, it was within an hour of the announcement. So, it got word on that. And that's when we are like, oh, guys, you may want to actually, I think Wilt Fong got not separately from me, but got the same information. And, it was like, hey, y'all might want to watch this.
yeah,
But, no matter when it actually happened, when A&M knew or whatever like that, he definitely was a huge OU lean. You and I
yeah,
both share the opinion silent commitments don't mean anything. If a kid doesn't go
yep,
public, unless it's just like waiting a couple days on a graphic or to make a video or whatever, if he doesn't go public, there's a reason why. He's not fully in the boat. But Hicks definitely, I would tell you, Oklahoma definitely considered him as on their commit list basically since the summer, and they had
yep.
good reason to believe that. He was a very very heavy OU lean. So A&M did a lot of did a great job digging out of that, getting them to look back. And I mean, Elijah Robinson, has known Hicks since he was in 8th grade. They've been watching him, recruiting him. I saw him at that may have been slightly before your time, at camp
Yeah.
when Hicks it was right after his 8th grade year, and he was 6'2", 210 pounds. And so I remember when he got his first offer, the coach was like, he's a lot bigger than that. He's 6'4". I was like, no way. Yeah, he was. He grew a little bit after seeing him there. But yeah, so A&M has been recruiting him for a long time. Did a great job. Distance obviously helps, especially with him back in Katy and not at Allen. So it's way closer to A&M than Norman. I think that that started to set in, and really, while he really liked OU, I think his heart was in Aggieland. So huge get now. A&M, if they only play 3 defensive linemen at a time and they have 12
True.
stars, I mean, it is. I'll tell you what. No matter what, it's great for being able to rotate a guy in. If you can take, Walter Nolan out of the game and you can put a 5-star in his place, or I mean, I guess you're taking Shamar Turner out of the game and you're putting Walter Nolan, so, the number 2 point, a 5-star for a 5-star, and then 5 stars. When you got Shamar Stewart on the outside playing a bunch. I mean, that's really good because defense linemen, it's not like offensive line. They cannot play every play. It's really tiring. So if you can throw depth in there that is that good. I mean, that's scary. Once these guys have some experience, I think next year this defense line has a chance to be like. I
Scary.
mean, I know I'm going out on a limb here, with the 5 stars all over the roster, but really good. Like, get Gabe
Yeah.
Dendy healthy. Walter Nolan really gets in a group. We've seen flashes from him. We've seen flashes from Shamar Stewart. I had the Turner and Stewart mixed up, but yeah, Shamar Stewart. And those other guys, still have a chance to show what they can do. So I think this defense line is going to be really good, and Hicks is going to help. He's a guy that can play any of the positions. He wants to stay at defensive end, but he's a big dude already. But A&M is using Shamar at defensive end. LT Overton's a big dude. I mean, there's a lot of big kids that they're putting out there. So,
No
so yeah,
brainer.
he can play. He can play any of the 4 spots if they go back to four linemen.
The 3 and 4 man fronts. That's a discussion we need to loop. We need to loop Tarp in and kind of get his thoughts on the 3 and 4 man front and kind of have him on the podcast as well to kind of explain. I know he wrote an article about it recently as well on Hicks. He's just a guy that has really powerful hands. That's when I got a chance to see him up here at Allen. And how about that defensive line that they had up at Allen last year with him and Zeno Zulu? Like just a really, really talented group between those two guys and everything else they had up front. His hand and his power with his hands and lower body is just, to me, the biggest thing that kind of stood out. And you're right. You can move him, play him on the outside, play him on the inside, and kind of go from there. And he can really be a versatile piece. I think he's got a chance to come in and play right away. As for what kind of swung it, I'm with you. I talked to people in the week leading up to his decision in the days, and there seemed to be a real strong confidence on the OU side. And I think Hicks was genuinely torn. I do think he's got a strong relationship with the OU staff. And I don't think they're going to give up until the early signing period either. They're going to continue to recruit him and try to get him back up. I believe he's still got an official visit to both schools. So, Oklahoma is going to push to try to get him back on campus. But I think when it came down to it, he's obviously really close to his family, and they've got a really tight-knit family, and the chance to be only an hour plus away from home, I think in the end was something that gave A&M an edge that Oklahoma couldn't match. And I think that's the biggest thing. Obviously, really strong relationships with Jimbo Fisher and Elijah Robinson. And it's that little edge when it comes down to it over the final days of, is he going to opt to go to Oklahoma or will he stay back close to home with his nearest family? And I think ultimately that's what ends up winning out. And, A&M now moves inside the top 20 in the recruiting rankings. Still a lot more work to do over the next couple of months. We're about 2.5 months out from the early signing period. Peyton Bowen's the biggest name to me now that remains on top of the board. And
get A&M, somebody on offense.
Get somebody on offense. Like I was about to say, I did a big board over the weekend, and the offensive one it's pretty much all committed guys right now. Jim Rai loves the one guy I think that is uncommitted. Who would be your top target? I'm putting you on the spot here a little bit. Who would be your biggest priority for A&M over the next couple of months?
Hakeem Williams. He was close to commit. His recruitment has been all over the place. 5-star receiver from Fort Lauderdale. His recruitment is all over the place. There's been so many different favorites. He ended up committing to Florida State. I think it was just last week. But A&M is the one constant that's been in there, and I have a feeling he'll be back. So A&M needs dynamic receivers and big ones. Like he and Chris Marshall are pretty similar players. You got Evan Stewart, who just got the speed and, great hands most of the time and everything, but Evan's not a big guy. So if you were able to put him with Hakeem Williams, so that would be probably my number one, because I like the backs that they have. Nobody's going to – A-Chain is just different. They're not going to have somebody to replace that speed. I mean, he's elite. But I like what LJ Johnson has shown. I like what Amari Daniels has shown. Le'Veon Moss is a guy they're really excited about. So, it'd be great to get Reuben Owens and Jeremiah Love or Roderick Robinson or whatever. That'd be great. Obviously, Peyton Bowen is huge. Like, safety play is big in this defense. We've seen it with Antonio Johnson. So, get Peyton Bowen. But I mean, if I was the coach and I had to pick, they said, you can only have one recruit and you can take anybody you want, it would be Hakeem Williams right now.
No question. I think he'd be obviously number one for me as well, just on the offensive side, because you need to provide a boost on that side of the ball. And I'm with you, just talking to people since he committed to Florida State, I think there's a feeling that he's going to get back to A&M at some point is kind of the feeling. And I think A&M is going to continue to stay on him until the early signing period. And there's a feeling that, Florida State obviously had the momentum. He's got some close friends on that roster, but I think there's still going to be some movement and activity left in this recruitment, and A&M still has that official visit in their pocket left to use. The other guy I would throw in there would be, Jaylen Brown, if they could get him in the same sort of mold, get a speed guy, a guy that can continue to take the top off of defense, I think he'd be the other guy that I would really look at as kind of a huge priority and a guy you've got to go all in on. There's obviously big targets, Javian Taviano and Peyton Bowen
Yeah,
and,
Tony
and Derek
Mitchell. We don't talk
Williams
about
and
him. We don't talk about him
Tony
enough.
Mitchell.
He's committed to Alabama. He's from down the road from
Mhm.
Tuscaloosa in Alabaster, which is a suburb of Birmingham. So really close to Alabama. But he has been to A&M twice since committing there. He's still got an
Yeah.
official to use, and he sort of reminds me of Bryce Anderson. He's a bigger DB, but that can play corner, can play nickel, can play safety. So just really versatile. So I would put him up there too. And I think A&M has a very legitimate chance of flipping him from Alabama. So yeah, he's one that people need to pay attention to as well. But like you said, I mean, all those guys are just committed. So many of the guys are committed places. A&M's working on doing a lot of flipping this year, and which is harder to do than just landing a lean, switching a lean to another to actually get them to open up. I mean, it's not impossible. Yeah. And kids now, especially Florida kids, and Georgia kids, they always take visits even if they're committed. So you at least get them on campus. But yeah, it is just a little weird that almost all their targets are committed.
No, and you look at the receiver targets. I think specifically A&M it's clear they're going to have to continue to add guys to that room and continue just stocking talent. And a guy like Raymond Cottrell, he's obviously taken multiple visits as well. That's another guy I look at that A&M is clearly been able to at least pique his interest and get him on campus. Now, whether he's going to flip from Georgia is a different thing. And the other one that I think is interesting is Micah Tease. I know we've kind of talked about him as well. I think he'd be an interesting guy to, obviously committed to Arkansas from Booker T. Washington up in Oklahoma, was back on campus at Arkansas this weekend, but took an official visit to A&M for the Miami game. Another guy that A&M has been able to get on campus multiple times. And I know you kind of reported not long after he got his offer that A&M was an offer that was really interesting to him and piqued his interest. So,
there were other recruits that were saying, other recruits that were saying before he committed Arkansas, some recruits thought he was, and not A&M commits, just kids that have, they were like, oh, all the talk was about A&M when he was on other visits. So there was definitely a lot of interest there. And then the fact that he came back, and he's got speed. You want to put a speedy guy in the slot. He would be the slot that you would want to take in this class.
And even, I mean, just big picture, if A&M is able to get one or two guys, say at receiver, if they're able to get a Hakeem Williams or Micah Tease, you think this roster could still use a couple transfer portal additions? And is this the year that Jimbo Fisher kind of starts to look at that receiver spot and think, if I could go out and get an impact guy? A receiver to me has to be the one position. If you're going to go add an impact guy this offseason, it has to be at that receiver spot, and just have a veteran presence that can go there. That to me is the number one need. An offensive lineman wouldn't hurt either, but a receiver that has college experience would be a big get for me if he is going to use the transfer portal.
Yeah, so we're going to learn. If Jimbo's ever planning to, there are a few coaches that are just holdouts, and I mean, Jimbo's a great recruiter, so this isn't something I would necessarily hold against him, but Jimbo has been really reticent to use the portal. I mean, he got, I think since the portal, they got Max Johnson and last year, the offensive lineman, Jameer. Why can't I remember his name?
Jameer Johnson.
Yes. Those are the only two people A&M has taken since the portal. So, I mean, other schools are taking 15 guys a class, when they can transfer. And this year, there's no cap on the number of incoming players. There's not a 25-man limit this year. So if A&M doesn't load up this year, doesn't take more than one this year, then I don't see them planning to do it much in the future. But yeah, I would go after a wideout. I would go after several positions. They did offer the kid from Syracuse, I think it was Taj Williams last year, but he had some issues that I think he wasn't able to transfer to an SEC school just because of the different academic requirements, because he was committed. Yeah. I don't remember where he was committed, but he had to open it back up. But so they at least were looking at receivers last year, but yeah, they need receivers. And then obviously the thing is, offensive tackles like you're seeing in this class. I mean, these guys are getting a ton of offers if they're just big and
Yep.
decent.
You
Schools
got to
want
develop
offensive
them on your
tackles.
own.
Yeah, so it's going to be the same way. If any good tackle goes in the portal, from another school, I mean, they're going to have everybody, but A&M really needs to look at that and think about getting a tackle in there.
No doubt. And Miles Frazier obviously was the one they kind of looked at last year, and you look at how he was coveted. I remember getting the chance to talk to him, and he kind of said his phone went from 1 to like 20 offers within a day, and was kind of
Yeah.
overwhelming. A&M was never able to get him on campus for a visit. But shoot, even an interior lineman, A&M's really struggled up front in the interior as well, which is just some of those twists and stunts. If you can even get a veteran interior guy to shore up that group, I think you at least have to look at it. So, it's going to be really interesting. We've kind of talked about it, and Josh Pate, I thought, had a really good segment on his show Sunday night about how Jimbo is going to kind of reach a fork in the road on a couple different fronts.
Yeah.
The play calling after the offseason's going to be one that he kind of has to look at and look internally, and I think the transfer portal's probably the other one on if he looks to add some immediate guys. I know he's been resistant to do it, but if this is a year that they do kind of look at it, it's going to be fascinating to watch, and we'll certainly be able to discuss a lot of those things when the season kind of comes to an end, and it's going to be one of the biggest storylines this offseason about what changes A&M makes. But for this week, all eyes will kind of be on Alabama, and we could be sitting here a week from now talking about what a different position it'll be if A&M is somehow able to pull off a stunner over Alabama. It's going to be interesting, and we'll certainly have you covered with all the latest. I think we went 42 minutes today. We kind of covered a lot of ground. We'll be back again later in the week to preview A&M and Alabama, but that'll do it for this edition of the Gig 'em 24/7 Sports Podcast. As a reminder, if you're following along YouTube, be sure to hit that subscribe button to get a notification every time a new video drops. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, give us a 5-star review, and be sure to hit the follow button on there as well to get a notification every time a new video drops. Otherwise, until next time, hang in there, A&M fans, and have a great week, and we'll be back soon.